right. Good evening, everyone. We'll call to order the March 2nd, 2021 meeting of the North Andover Planning Board. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order, suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 38, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the North Andover Planning Board will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with a right and/or requirement to attend can be found on the town's website at www.northandoverma.gov. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so on their televisions by tuning into Comcast Channel 8, Verizon Channel 26, or to www.northandovercam.org. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we'll post on the Town of North Andover website audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. If members of the public would like to participate in a public hearing, please email your question or comment prior to or during the meeting to jenright@northandoverma.gov. The question or comment will be read during the proceeding and responded to accordingly. Okay, let's start with 1160 Great Pond Road. Paul Griffin, request for release of 2 performance bonds associated with a site plan review and watershed permit granted in March 2017 for the construction of an art center building.
All right, so this is a standard bond release request. An as-built plan, engineer certification letter, and an architect certification letter is included in your packet. The work is complete, and I recommend full release of bond funds.
Okay. Any questions or comments? Can we get a...
Make a motion to release all the bonds of this project.
Thank you. Mr. Simons, motion made.
Aaron with the second.
Aaron with the second. Okay. John.
Yes.
Aaron.
Yes.
I vote yes. Peter.
Aye.
Kate.
Yes.
Okay, that is approved. Thank you. Next, we are going to do Master Plan Implementation Committee second quarter report. And I believe we have Stan Limpert and we have Kelly Cormier from who's our planning board representative. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So we are joined also by 2 other members of the Master Plan Implementation Committee, Jay Dowd and John Strauss as well. So there's 4 of us representing the Master Plan Committee Implementation Committee this evening. So I believe Stan is going to share a brief presentation and why he is working on that. I'll go ahead and start walking through it.
Can you see that?
I can't see it yet, Stan.
No. I thought I had shared it, so maybe not. Yeah, no.
So I'll get started, Stan, and then as you can share it, we'll go from there. So I'm on slide 3 of the deck that's part of the materials. And so in the last quarter, we focused a lot on defining the process for the Master Plan Implementation Committee. We're working with the 7 elements that were part of the master plan and defining 7 element subcommittees within the Master Plan Implementation Committee. And there are at least 2 of us, 2 of each committee member assigned to each of those element areas.
Kelly,
all right.
Kelly, I don't mean to interrupt, but I just want to call out exactly what the file name is called for the public benefit. So you're referring to the MPIC Q2 Progress Report 222 2021 PowerPoint presentation, correct?
Yes, thank you, Jean.
Okay, thank you.
Can you see that now?
Yes, I can see it, Stan.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. and I'm on still on slide 3 of that deck. We
Yeah.
working on those strategies. We finalized each of the subcommittees worked to finalize a short list of strategies to really begin focus and working on it and focusing on. We've been having each of those subcommittees meetings and discussions with the different groups within town that are responsible for those particular strategies. And we developed our first recommendation and presented that to the select board as well last week during the select board meeting. Stan, next slide. Just as a reminder, these are those element areas. So our team obviously is focused on those same, our subcommittees are focused on those same elements that are within the master plan. And so we continue to focus on those areas. And now I'm going to hand it over to Stan for him to dive a little bit deeper on how we went about picking those strategies to focus on.
Thank you, Kelly. So we looked at the 103 strategies and decided that what we would try to do is start out with in each of the element areas to try to pick 2, no more than 3 strategies to start working on to both decide how best to be able to help the implementation groups and then also how to start collecting information about each of these strategies. So each of the element areas picked 2 strategies that we then began working on, and those typically involved having discussions with the various implementation groups. As you would imagine, it's a lot of the departments in town government, police, fire, DPW, a number of different groups that we talked to and started to look at ways we could be helping with those implementation strategies. And the other thing we wanted to be able to do is we wanted to be able to document these activities so that we would have a record of how we got to decisions or how we decided that we had helped and closed some of these strategies. And as Kelly mentioned, we had our first recommendation from one of our element areas, and John Strauss is going to speak to that now.
There we go. All right, thanks, Dan. So representing our transportation subcommittee, it's the Master Plan Implementation Committee's recommendation that we encourage the town select board to formally adopt a MassDOT approved complete streets policy, a tier 1 policy at this level, which demonstrates a commitment to providing safe and accessible options for all travel modes, walking, biking, transit, and vehicles for people of all ages and abilities. I don't know if you need, Stan, if you want to, expand upon that a little bit, or.
Well, you might just mention what the benefit of doing this may be in terms of funds or grants or other things.
Yeah. So once the town has formally adopted a complete streets policy per MassDOT standards, and MassDOT has a very detailed process for how to go about doing it. What it does is it opens up an entire new source of funding for projects for the town through the DPW. So if we were, for instance, redoing 125 and not only just as a roadway project, but if we were to accommodate bicycle lanes, sidewalks and whatnot, it would, if we had a policy adopted, it allows us to tap funding to contribute to those types of projects. So if the town is ready to make a formal commitment for projects moving forward, there's additional funding that would help us to accomplish those projects.
I see. Gene, didn't you say that you were already, the planning department was already working on this? Gene?
So, sorry, I was on mute. I had to get back to it. The planning department's not working on it. However, we've already made a recommendation to the town manager, and we have a meeting scheduled on Thursday, given the prioritization of this.
Yeah.
So the DPW planning, ComDev, and the town manager will be meeting on Thursday.
Great. Okay. Thank you, John. So just let me say a couple more words about some of our progress. So it turns out you won't be surprised that we found that there was work already ongoing on some of these strategies. And in some cases, a couple of limited cases, some of these strategies were already complete. Some in the sense that they had sort of been overtaken by their events and were no longer applicable. We've also had some discussions about what it means to define a strategy as complete. In some cases, these are ongoing strategies that sort of defy a definition of completion because they're just work in progress for long periods of time. But we're continuing to work on trying to identify when we can close out, if you will, the strategy and say that that was done. And we also want to figure out the best way we can help the implementation groups, which are typically town departments, to work on these strategies. We want to be helpful and supportive. We don't want to get in anybody's way. So we're continuing to work on how best to be helpful in these areas. So in the next quarter, we're going to be continuing more of these discussions with the implementation groups and trying to find ways we can help and work on the completion criteria, if you will, how to figure that out. We also have been talking about a communications plan about our activities and what we're doing so we can keep the public informed. And we're going to be doing more work on that. And of course, as we complete these, as we do reach a sort of closure on some of the strategies we first pick, of course, we'll pick more off our list and keep working those. And we're also going to continue to work on a way to track our activities so that we can document this both for the public and for the record. So that's where we're at. And that's our story.
All right. That
Okay.
is what we have for our quarterly report.
Great. Thank you very much. Awesome. Okay. Awesome. Thank you. All right. So let's move on to continued public hearings. 3 Great Pond Road. It's my understanding that this is being continued until March, or was continued until March 16th at our last meeting.
Yes, it was. And as you suggested, we are going to mail a courtesy mailing to abutters just to inform them that the hearing opened on March 24th and no evidence has been heard since then. And the applicant has requested continuances every meeting since then until March 16th. And so that mailing will go out on Thursday to just inform people that evidence will be heard on March 16th.
Okay. Very good. All right. All right. So let's move to annual town meeting zoning bylaw articles. All right. So most of these we've already talked about and didn't seem like, well, Gene, let me ask. So for summary of dimensional requirements, corridor development district 2, business 4 district, downtown overlay historic district, subdistrict A, and the watershed protection district, are there any additional comments or questions that have come in?
There are not. There's been no comments from the public on any of those articles. I've done minor little changes to clean it up a little bit. And on March 16th, I intend to send you the final draft for the planning board report. So the only substantive new bylaw is the sign bylaw. It was included in the last planning board report, but continued until tonight. Town Council Suzanne Egan is on the meeting call and can speak to any questions you may have on the sign bylaw, but it has been included in the package tonight.
Okay, so I was going to get there next once we finish these. Okay, is there anyone on the line that wants to talk about either members of the people that have an interest in that or members of the board that wants to talk about CDD2 business for the mill or the watershed? Okay, good. I think we're good on those. Okay, let's talk about the sign bylaw. Do you or Suzanne want to talk about the changes, or do you want to just ask questions or make comments?
I can bring, hi, good evening, it's Suzanne Egan, Town
Hi,
Council.
Suzanne.
Hi. I can give you sort of a very broad overview of the sign bylaw, the changes to the sign bylaw. And really what they're intended to do is to make the bylaw content neutral in the way that, in the manner in which it regulates signs on private property. Currently, the bylaw combines both signs on public property and private property. I've separated that out. Now it's just going to be dealing with signs that are placed on private property. And then the ones that are on public property will be separately dealt with and regulated because that's within the Board of Selectmen's authority. The other changes are specifically dealing with the content aspects of the regulation. Currently, we regulate a lot of the signs on the basis of what the sign is communicating. And instead of doing that, we've changed it so that it is regulating the sign in terms of the length of time it can, for temporary signs, the length of time they can be installed, when they have to be taken down. And then for other signs, it really just sticks to the same dimensional requirements and permitting requirements as it exists today.
Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you for taking this first stab at addressing the sign bylaw. I had a couple of questions. So one of the things it talks about is there's in permitted signs under 195 6.6 in residence districts. I didn't see do we have a definition somewhere of residence districts?
It should be residential districts.
So, okay, but even residential districts, right? Like, are we talking R1, R2, R4? Or are we talking anywhere where there are residences, right? Like, we have some mixed use zones which have residences but also have commercial. Or we have residential districts where maybe a commercial use is grandfathered or something like that. So it just might make sense to be a little more specific of, are we talking about like specific R1, R2, or R4s, or are we talking about anywhere where there's residences as part of the district?
Yeah, so that that is in reference to residential districts, R1, R2, or 3 or 4. And so we can be, I can clarify that.
Yeah, it just might make sense. Right? And I mean,
Yep.
I don't know if any of if there are overlays in any of those that where this, like, if there's an overlay, does that apply? Just to be clear on where we're talking. I mean, I think we know what you mean, but that might be good. And then what's the issue with off-premises signs? I never really understood why there's a distinction between off-premises and premises. Like, why do we regulate that? I guess is my question.
Well, it's interesting because this really is a content-based regulation, right? Because an off-premises sign is a sign that is communicating something about activity that occurs off-premises. So that's sort of the definition of regulating something on the basis of its content, and on-premises is regulating it or defining it as to what it's communicating about what's occurring on the same lot. And so I did in this revision attempt to sort of get rid of that type of regulation versus with the on-premises and the off-premises, and instead made it a prohibited individuals from installing or displaying signs which they are being paid to do. So there's a particular provision in there that says essentially all the signs have to be relating to your property, because you can't use a lot just for the purposes of the principal activity of renting it out for the installation of signs.
So, but in the prohibited uses, we still have no off-premise signs, and off-premises signs are prohibited except for directional signs is allowed in 190. Maybe this is an older copy, but I don't know if that's been kind of cleaned up. It looks like you address the off-premises signs in 195 6.6, but there's still some mention of it in the paragraphs above in 6.5.
In 6.5, okay.
Yeah,
but
again, I guess I'm just not sure if, like, why do we care if someone puts a sign in their commercial property that says if they run a wine store and someone wants to pay them for their location and says, go buy Jimmy John's pizza, it's the best, to call this number. Like, is there a policy reason behind that? Like, why are we even getting into what the signs? I'm just curious what the policy reason is.
Yeah, and I actually can't speak to that because this has been a part of the zoning bylaw.
Yeah.
And this is part of what I was trying to address with this. And I think that maybe what it is because we have particular uses in our zoning bylaw of what uses are allowed. And within the table of uses, I don't believe there's an activity or a use allowed to be for the purposes of displaying signs. I mean, maybe you could do it broadly, like that's a commercial purpose, and then there would be,
Right.
you have to look at whether there were structures and how you regulate the structures. But for the sole purpose of installing signs, you don't really have that as a allowed use.
Okay, it's interesting. I mean, I could definitely see problems with it. If using people's spaces just for advertising. But at the same point, if we're trying to be content neutral, we're not really being content neutral. If we're saying you have to advertise for if you own 4 buildings in town and you want to say, okay, go to these different places if you have multiple. It's just interesting, but okay.
Yeah. So it's interesting because we're not, so this part of these changes are from sort of a model sign bylaw that's trying to deal with the issues that are addressed by the U.S. Supreme Court in this most recent case, which is the Reed versus Gilbert case. And so they have developed this model sign bylaw that says, don't regulate it on the basis of the content of what you're trying to communicate. So instead you look at what's the use of the sign? How is the sign being used, and regulating it on the basis of that? And you can argue, as you just did, that it's actually what we're really trying to do is regulate it on the basis of its content, but we're not, because we're not saying, it doesn't, you can, as long as it's for your property and you're not renting out your property to be used for signs, then essentially you can say anything you want. That's not anything, but within reason. We're not going to regulate it on the basis of what it's communicating.
Interesting. Okay. Any other board members have comments?
No, all good.
All good. Okay. Great. Well, I'll look at it again just to see if there are any other edits, but it's a Board of Selectmen one, so we'll probably vote it maybe the next meeting about, or once they vote to support it, we can vote on whether or not we support it or not as well.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Suzanne.
Thank you.
All right, moving right along. Next is Royal Crest. Anything else other than that, Gene? Okay.
I'm sorry, meeting anything else on the agenda? other than
Yeah.
that?
Just make sure I
So
didn't
the
miss
other
anything.
warrant articles, you're willing to just carry them to March 15th?
Yes.
Yes,
Maybe
okay.
at that point, I think we vote on them, but I don't
Okay.
see any. Let's move along tonight.
Okay, so yes, Trinity Financial request.
Okay. Royal
Okay.
Crest Estates, 1 and 28 Royal Crest Drive, Trinity Financial, Jim Keefe, proposed master redevelopment plan for the property. All right, so tonight we're going to talk about some transit, some traffic, stormwater. I think those are the main things we're going to highlight tonight. I know we had mentioned at the last meeting about, having time to talk about when we're going to get to public comments and things like that. So I think my plan would be at the next meeting to start hitting some of the comments that have come in. We're trying to organize them to hit them in kind of topics. We'll try to have that ready before the meeting as to which comments we're going to try to address, but I anticipate at least addressing comments about traffic at the next meeting that have come in, talking about them, trying to answer what questions we have, posing questions to the applicant if appropriate, answering them if appropriate, saying we need more information if appropriate. So we're going to start with those and trying to do them in an organized fashion at the next meeting, starting with traffic. If we come up with other ones that we feel comfortable, that we've segregated the questions and have a good sense of the comments, we may add to that as well. So that's my plan. So let's talk about, well,
So Eitan,
Jean, where do you want to start?
if I can just interject there. So that being
Yeah.
said, I've invited the town's peer reviewer, Jeffrey Dirk, to attend the next meeting, as well as Mass DOT. Mass DOT will provide the board kind of an overview of the whole Route 114 improvement project. So running from Waverly Road to Willow Street. And the Bertucci Ethan Allen redevelopment plan has been resubmitted. So they withdrew at the last meeting, but they filed an application to resubmit their application. And so Mass DOT will be available as well to kind of speak to the area around that project. And so I
Great.
think that'll be really helpful in order to put some things in perspective. And I've isolated the traffic comments in a summary memo that I hope to have to the board for the next meeting. So you can address traffic comments, I think, at a minimum.
Fantastic. Okay, so where should we start tonight?
Okay, so tonight we've invited Kathleen Lambert, who is the Assistant Administrator of the Merrimack Valley Regional Transit Authority, to kind of speak about public transportation opportunities associated with this project. So I've provided her the conceptual plan because for the most part, we're dealing with conceptual at this point, but she is informed on the conceptual plan. We've had some conversations related to the project in general, and in your packet, there's a video showing potential for public transportation, and I will turn it over to Kathleen to kind of speak to that.
Great.
Hi, good evening. I'm Kathleen Lambert, MVRTA, and as Jean introduced me, I'm the assistant administrator. And not only that, I have a background in architecture as well as transportation planning. So the video that you may have previewed was a design that I created for the Little Rock Port Authority in Little Rock, Arkansas. But what it does is it demonstrates all the kinds of things that you might want to put into a transit stop. Now, one of the things about this property, the way it's been proposed, is there's some density to the property. And I think with some low-income housing, there would definitely be some transit riders. There would be an opportunity to provide transit in this area for folks who want to live more of a car-free lifestyle. Nearby on 114, there's a lot of shopping, there's grocery stores, there's a lot of opportunity to create that kind of community. Certainly with the university across the street, I guess it's still a college. Is it a university or a college? I think it's still Merrimack College, correct, Jean?
College. Yep,
Yeah.
college.
So, but it could be a university district forming. So I think one of the beauties of this development, with the university there, it becomes not only a neighborhood, but it becomes a cultural center, where you have education and you have mixed income, and you have mixed opportunities in a neighborhood, and densification that really is an opportunity for transit to thrive. So the video demonstrates all the kinds of things that you might want to put into a transit stop. For example, there's a large shelter that is lighted through solar lighting. It provides an opportunity for a kiosk that would kind of describe the college or the neighborhood opportunities, for businesses. It become an advertising tool. One of the things that the Little Rock Port asked for is they wanted a kiosk with a touchscreen so someone could apply for a job. So And then also, when you see the intersection design, it obviously has prominent curb cuts. It has a place for boarding for the bus, not just one of the common sidewalk designs in Little Rock is there's a 3-foot grass verge, and then there's a 5-foot sidewalk. Well, wheelchairs have a lot of trouble getting across a grass verge. So you can see the piece that where the bus lands is paved, and then the grass continues away from that. The stop is designed as a high capacity stop. So obviously it has larger features than a normal stop might have, but it might be a high capacity stop where the university is. All our buses have bike racks on them. So one of the things that we have proposed for our bus riders, especially students have discount passes. They can ride the bus and use their bicycle to get around a campus or get around to the coffee shop or the library, wherever they want to kind of travel once they reach their destination, like the college. You know, it's a great opportunity to provide infrastructure built in that will serve the neighborhood in a long-term capacity. That I think could be very beneficial for this kind of development. Now, as Joe mentioned, Joe Costanzo, who's our administrator, mentioned in his email, you know, when you provide road design in the interior of the development, anything that can handle a ladder truck or fire access can handle a bus. So I noticed that in the road design for the development that there are some roads that are wider, some roads that are more narrow. So serving interior to the development is an opportunity. Serving on 114 is another opportunity. And certainly if you have mixed income and, you know, age modified income, say plus 55 housing, there's going to be a need for our buses that provide mobility access, our Easy Trans service, which is the smaller bus that is for disabilities and seniors who can't access fixed route. So obviously those buses will be have access to will need access for the interior of the development. And the main thing you have to really be concerned about, because a bus can pull up to a corner. Remember, a bus pulls up to a corner, picks somebody up, takes about 30 seconds, believe it or not. And it really doesn't impede access to traffic at all. I know that's what a lot of folks think about when they're unfamiliar with what transit does, but the process is really quick. And certainly with mobile payment coming online, it's going to be even quicker. So I guess that's, if anybody has any questions about what I've shown in the video, or you had an idea about what transit does, you know, please let me know.
So I have a couple questions. So
Sure.
where in a project like this where you have it's on a main road but with interior roads and a large property with multiple types of residences in different locations throughout the property, where do you think from the and public transit perspective would be a good place for one, like a larger station, and two, in these interior roads, would you have little stations or just little, would you recommend little signs just for like locations for people to or because I think those are things that would be really good to
Yeah.
designate and design up front rather than try to shoehorn in later on.
Sorry. She's a puppy still. What I would recommend is that the main transit stop would be on the main road, pretty close to an entrance for the college, like a major intersection. Now, I understand the way the property is designed right now, that there's a big dormitory location. That's probably a good place because in the business what we call trip generators. So there'd be places where people would generally board, right? So interior to the property, I would recommend things like signage, but I understand there's going to be a hotel now. At a hotel, you might want a covered stop, but it may not be a big, high volume stop like the one I illustrated. You know, that, think about it this way. I mean, it can be just a small shelter that's, I'm trying to think of this. We had the small shelter that I worked on and specified for Little Rock was, as I remember, it was 7 by 4 by 7, and it fit about 3 people, 1 wheelchair and 2 seated people. And then the cover, would cover a couple more people. So you could probably get, 5 people in the shelter at one time. So it'd be just a place to get out of the sun or the rain or the weather for a few minutes while you're waiting for the bus.
Who pays for those if they're on private property?
So that's really interesting. So you were talking about Complete Streets earlier, and Complete Streets grants, you can apply for Complete Streets grants that will pay for shelter infrastructure. And then what the Transit Authority can do is use their capital money to provide matching funds for the Complete Streets grants. So it's a great synergy between what transit can do and what development for the town can do. And I've built many things that way. The other way is we can apply for capital funds for transit infrastructure, and the town might provide the 20% match for a capital project. So that makes it very low cost to start proliferating transit infrastructure. And the other thing that we can associate with transit infrastructure is bike racks, covered bike parking. That was also illustrated in my video that I showed you. Like I said, one of the things that you got to remember too, it takes like 20 minutes to walk a mile, like average for a person, right? It takes 5 minutes to ride on a bicycle the same mile. So we talk about the walk shed for transit as 3/4 of a mile from the fixed route, right? So if you're a little further away, you can extend your trip by 10 or 15 minutes with a bicycle. It's no big deal, because the time penalty, if you will, for commuting that way is very low. Whereas if you're walking, it's a little more of, you need more of a leg up in terms of transferring in a large location like the site that we're talking about. So I think providing bike infrastructure transit is a great compatible way to really start building a secondary, what I call a secondary network of transportation that isn't solely married to what a car can do. Because remember, I have a car too. My car's sitting in a garage. What's it doing all day? Does nothing. I drive to work. It sits all day. I drive home. Sits all day. And providing parking spaces and parking lots is incredibly costly and time consuming and land consuming. It's not a great conservation approach to what transportation can really provide. And the good thing about a bus network versus, a fixed line network, like a train network or a BRT line, which is generally good where you have high capacity. A bus network is flexible. If you find you have a trip generator capacity need at a different location, you can reorient your route or add a piece to a route, make it more flexible and more useful. And we run on roads. We already have roads. So it's not like you're adding infrastructure per se for us.
Okay,
So transit
great.
stops are great, for getting users to really participate because it identifies where the bus stops, what's available to you, and you have signage and even digital advertising opportunities to really explain what's going on in the neighborhood, as well as the transit availability.
So, Eitan, if I could just, for a point of clarity, so Kathleen, can you speak to if there were to be a bus stop within the Mass DOT right away? So
Mhm.
what would that take in terms of public infrastructure within Mass DOT's authority?
Well, we would just have to work with the DOT to design it in the beginning. In fact, I've been working with a couple of the engineers for MassDOT right now. I've been asking about, a location over on 113 that we really need bus stops for, and they're building it into the project. And because of the US DOT edict, if you will, to provide multimodal access to projects, that's something that when FHWA is reviewing projects, bumps them up to the top of the list because they're looking for that multimodal access. So I think it's a benefit in terms of funding and garnering priority for projects.
Right, and so you have no authority to mandate any type of bus stop within the Mass DOT right away. So I would ask Trinity, have you had any conversations with Mass DOT related to public transportation within the right of way in the frontage of this project?
No, not particularly because it's in such a preliminary state, but I could
Let me,
certainly start talking about that.
let's hear from Michael. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we have not yet had those conversations with Mass DOT, but we are, as we've been talking about all along, we're really excited about the sort of pedestrian-friendly environment we're trying to create here. And so this talk about public transit and the opportunities here is something that we are really into, and we want to continue that conversation with Kathleen and her colleagues to try to integrate and bring some public transit to the area. We're happy to participate with Mass DOT and with the MVRTA, and where those sort of synergies, where that cooperation can occur, we absolutely welcome it. So we want to be a part of that.
So I would just say, again, you guys got a lot to do and a lot of priorities, but things we keep hearing about are traffic and
Yep.
numbers, and every person that rides the bus may not need a car. Every person that rides a bicycle may not need a car, and that's 2, 4, 6 less trips a day, whatever it is, and those things add up. And so I think when the working group is going, if you guys can start looking on the interior specifically about bus stop locations and where those are going to be, I think that's a great thing. I do, and then let's talk with Mass DOT when they're here next week about what we can do to further those conversations about a bus stop being worked into the improvement plans. Let's start. Let's start that now. So within the working group, I think that's a good spot to start talking about different grants and things like that. Grant funding is great for something like this if we can get it. Gene, do you know? Does anyone know? Does Merrimack have any bike rentals and stuff like that for students? I mean, I'm seeing that in cities a lot. I think that would be another great thing. Those blue bikes that students want to rent them and take that because they have a class, all the way to the other end of campus. That might be a good thing too.
Yeah.
So not that I know of, but they have a shuttle, obviously, that shuttles people from Royal Crest to campus and to some of the area retail complexes. But I do not know about Blue Bike.
Yeah, but one of the blue bike thing might be something worthwhile.
Yep.
Now that we hit, as more stuff is happening, we're getting, with the new Five Guys and all that stuff opening down there, someone may want to say, hey, let me just take my bike down and or going down to Main Street, things like that. Those would be good things to have too.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I've been seeing recently in the neighborhoods around me, I live in Haverhill and I visit North Andover all the time. I have, my grandparents were there for many years and I grew up visiting and was born in North Andover. So I have a deep relationship with the community. But what I've been seeing is a lot of e-bikes. People use electric bikes to get around, instead of having a car, which is a great affordable way to try to, give people some different kinds of alternative transportation. And I think the more ways that you connect the on-street and off-street bicycle with transit and other forms of transportation, more opportunity you give people to be successful and access new education, jobs, and healthcare.
Okay, very good. Any other board members want to talk about the MVRTA or transit in general?
This is Aaron. I have a question.
Great. Thanks, Aaron.
Just in regard to really funding, if this project goes through, gets built, right now there's no current. I'm looking on the authority's website. There's no bus route that goes by there right now. So how does that get funded? Because obviously that bus route is not going to be a revenue positive feature. So it's got to be subsidized in some manner. So what happens there?
Well, I think really it depends on the transit authority priorities as the development moves forward. It's something that we would have to, just like, for example, Amazon is coming to Osgood Landing. We have partial route to Osgood Landing coming from Haverhill, but we don't have a bus route coming from the other location. So we know that we're going to need to allocate funds to try to provide that transportation. And so there's a few ways we can look at it. We can look at it as a public-private partnership. We can look at it as additional funding that the community would provide, or the entire authority would chip in and provide more transportation for that area. It's just like, for example, Lawrence has provided free routes for our ridership now. Those free routes were funded by the city and continue to be funded by the city, but it also benefits some of the other surrounding communities that feed into those routes. So that's the thing about having a transit authority. It's really a cooperative kind of venture, even though each individual community contributes by revenue miles in their community. So to extend the bus route, we would have to look and see how we would need to fund that. And I don't think that it should be just all on North Andover. There's other ways we can look at those resources. Private partnerships, state funding. There's other ways we can approach it. It's not just all on North Andover. And, I don't know if you understand, Aaron, the majority of our funding comes from multiple sources, from the federal resources, from state resources primarily, and then the communities that are part of the transit authority make up a portion of the difference. It's a much smaller portion. 37% comes from the state and 30% comes from the feds. So it's a lot less of a leg up than you might think, adding a few miles to a bus route. We already serve the 114 plaza there.
Great, thank you, Kathleen. All right, anyone else? No? Okay, great. Great. So stormwater, Gene? You're muted.
Okay, does anybody have any more questions for me?
I don't think so. Thank you, Kathleen.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody, and I appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so there was a presentation included in the packet earlier this weekend, and most recently this afternoon, a stormwater memo that kind of details pre-permitting stormwater management design. So I think I'll turn it over to Michael Lozano to kind of walk you through the presentation as well as that memo.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Gene. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members. I am going to start off with the presentation. It's titled Utilities, Stormwater, and Sustainability Pres 3/121 PDF. We've packaged together, a discussion on utilities, stormwater, and sustainability, and energy efficiency goes with that. We think that those topics really sort of naturally go together, and we'll touch on all of those things. We'll talk about some of the existing infrastructure, the existing conditions at Royal Crest today, and then we'll talk about what we are proposing and how we're going to accommodate all of those things going forward. And then we're available to answer any questions, obviously. I'm here with Chris Lovett and Jeff Koderitz from VHB, our civil engineers. So they'll be assisting me with the presentation and obviously the discussion. So just getting going on the presentation. I'm on the first page after the title page. And Gene, I don't know if you're sharing the screen now yet, or if I should just walk through it. Everyone has a copy of it.
I am not sharing it. Eitan, do you want me to share it?
I think we lost Eitan. I mean, I could just walk through it.
Sure. No, it's fine.
Okay.
Okay, I'll bring it up, Michael.
Okay.
Sorry, I have a lot of files to click through the.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you see that?
I can't see it.
No, not
Why
yet.
don't we just go through? We all have it available.
Okay. Okay, that's no problem. We've all got a copy of it. So I'm just on the first page after the title page. It's titled Existing Conditions. So I know that we've been talking about this for some time, but just a reminder, the existing Royal Crest is a very large site. It's approximately 77 acres. There's over 55 buildings spread throughout the site. Not a lot of logic there. Very little sidewalks. Buildings encroaching into wetland, no build zones and buffers. The existing buildings are in, they're very outdated and tired. They have They're not really up to modern standards. They've got significant issues such as, a significant amount of asbestos included in just about all of the building materials, which more or less prevents their reuse. They're totally safe today, but in order to improve those buildings and bring them up to modern standards is more or less impossible. That's the above ground infrastructure. The underground infrastructure on the site is also nearing the end of its useful lifespan. So the existing stormwater systems, the existing utility systems are all significantly outdated and not up to modern standards. And really, that's the whole reason why we're doing this, and that the existing Royal Crest, needs to be reimagined and redone. So that's what we've been doing. We've been talking about with the board for some time now. And we'll talk to you about some of the specifics on those existing conditions related to the utilities and stormwater and the building systems. And we'll talk about the proposed situation. So I'll turn it over to Chris Lovett now from VHB. We'll go on to the next slide, and he can start to walk you through the existing conditions and the proposed, starting with utilities, going to stormwater, and then we'll talk about energy efficiency and building systems. So Chris, are you on?
Yeah, Mike, I can hop in.
Page 3, right?
Yeah, page 3 would be great if you don't mind, Gene.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can see my screen now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. This is Jeff Ketteritz of VHB. As Mike mentioned, we're the civil engineers working on on this effort as well. So hoping to run through just some quick highlights and to tack on to where Mike was going, really highlighting on the existing infrastructure and kind of how outdated it is. So what's up here, this is just a graphic of the existing water utilities. We, based on some preliminary meetings and observations of the site, we understand it's subject to, frequent water main breaks. It's just really the age of the infrastructure is hitting its life. So, as part of the project would obviously include a complete reconstruction of those utilities up to the latest engineering standards for the water utilities. Very similarly on the sanitary sewer side, which is really the next slide. Pretty much all the existing utilities on site are vitrified clay pipe. That coupled with high groundwater table is likely a very high cause for some I&I in the sewer system.
So groundwater infiltration into the source system. So water that's being treated that shouldn't be, collected and treated that shouldn't be.
Right. And more flow taxing the the sewer district than's necessary. So that clay pipe is in about 2-foot sections. So there's tons of opportunities for the groundwater just continually seep in, and in larger storm events, overtaxing the sewer system. So, a big part of that is replacing that infrastructure with upgraded utilities will eliminate a lot of that load on the existing sanitary.
If I can jump in a little bit, I think you should focus on the future and not so much in the past, because, on the one hand, what you're saying is, okay, there's an overload on the sewer system, but I bet the load on the sewer system when you're done is actually going to be greater than it is now. So it may be an inefficient use now, and it may be cleaner in the future, but don't try to sell us that it's going to be less in the future, because it's not.
Yeah, no, we wouldn't say that. We just wanted to highlight the current conditions now, but more than happy to talk to the proposed case. I think what we would recommend is potentially some metering programs to help quantify that, and we'd be happy to work with DPW to correlate some of those improvements. On the stormwater side, this here is just a quick watershed map of the area tributary to eventually everything on site is drained out through an existing 36-inch pipe just off of Berkeley Road there to the, I guess, plan west of this page. So, what this diagram highlights is, as Mike mentioned, is substantially large site is the Royal Crest, but also there's a decent upstream tributary area of up to about another 50 acres that drains onto the site. So, we're well aware that there's a lot of stormwater mitigation required, and that the team is committed to providing in order to mitigate these issues and accommodate for the proposed development as well. And yeah, if we can probably go to this next slide. So this is just a quick graphic. We've done a very preliminary hydrologic and hydraulic analysis of the proposed development, and starting from a regulatory standpoint, what our requirements would be, comparing the existing proposed conditions. So that's meeting the Mass DEP stormwater standards. That's meeting the town's local stormwater and erosion control bylaws, and as additionally the EPA's MS4 permit. Understand that the town's going to be documenting compliance with that. So what we did is we were using that as a baseline, but in addition, looking at the constraints with the substantial drainage area, both offsite and the limited infrastructure, we're proposing to include a significantly larger amount of stormwater mitigation volume to address those concerns. So what we're anticipating essentially is an extra roughly 20 acre feet of storage spread out throughout the new site development that would help alleviate the existing drainage issues on site. In addition to obviously what's required to support the redevelopment, which we'd be doing regardless for the permitting process. So this graphic here is intended to just give an order of magnitude of those stormwater management areas. We're looking at a combination between expanding the surface areas to the back of the site, which is really an enhancement of some stormwater wetlands. A lot of the resource areas on site are essentially just strictly serving a stormwater purpose. That we would look to kind of the green areas on the graphics here would be our suggestions for enhancing those, both wetland mitigation, but also providing some stormwater relief, particularly for the upstream areas. The other hatch here is you can see the blue shaded areas. That's really where the proposed stormwater infrastructure would go to mitigate the peak rates and volumes. We understand because of the soil conditions, because of the groundwater conditions, we think it's appropriate to avoid surface stormwater treatments to the extent possible from a volume mitigation standpoint. So we'd anticipate this to be handled mostly with closed subsurface tanks to address that issue. So this graphic's just intended to show where we're looking at on an order of magnitude for those storage areas.
So am I correct? Can you just go back to that slide for a second? That from that off-site area, it slopes down into the site, and does the site continue to run down to the highway, or does it level off? I mean, I'm just trying to get an overall sense of the flow.
Generally kind of to the plan bottom left is where everything kind of flows diagonally across. Route 114 pitches from right to left on this image, and then everything's ultimately tributary. Kind of the bottom left corner where the surface parking lot is shown. I don't know if it's possible to zoom in, but really it's just south of the existing wetland that's right on the left edge of the page. But yeah, generally, John, it's kind of a diagonal gradient across the site.
So, because it would seem to me then, again, and I'm way out of my element here, that if that's the natural flow, you would have to put your retention underground storage in that area. I mean, the point is the wetlands help you with the off-site flow, but they don't help you much with anything on-site.
Correct.
Correct. So we try to break it up and have multiple areas where we're trying to get as much volume wherever we can. But that you're right, John. That's going to be the key area is up before the outlet pipe.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question, please, Eitan.
Please.
So you've commented on that area plan top right, which is the hillside neighborhood. You were saying that you're well aware that there's a substantial amount of stormwater flow coming off that hillside road area onto the site. Have I sort of characterized what you said correctly?
Yes. That's our understanding.
So what effect will the changes in your stormwater plan on site have on the ability of stormwater to drain off the hillside road area as it apparently does now through the site? What effect will your changes have? How will that affect the stormwater movement off hillside compared to today?
So the water will still come down into the wetland. So we're not doing any grading. We're not really doing anything along that boundary, and we can't because of the wetlands. So the water will continue to come down through there, and then that'll overtop into our systems. And so what we're trying to do, it's not going to affect how it gets off the site above, but we will be able to slow down and manage it coming through the Royal Crest site.
Right. Well, that makes sense to me, but I want to follow my question a little bit just to make sure that I've asked it correctly. And that answer helps. Let me just take another case. Let's say that there was less stormwater collection and movement on the site in the future than there is today. Then it seems to me that would have a tendency to back up the stormwater that's trying to flow off of the hillside road. And what I'm trying to get at is, are your changes going to impede by sort of backing up because the stormwater movement off site is it slower? Is that at a higher level? I understand what your earlier answer was about, it's still going to flow off site from hillside, but it seemed to me that the net flow is going to be affected by the movement of stormwater on the site. If it's not moving the way it is today, it could conceivably cause that stormwater coming off hillside to back up a little more. And that's what I'm trying to get to. What effect will your stormwater changes have, not only on the site, but on the neighboring hillside area?
Yeah, so we'll need to demonstrate that we're not doing that. Because of the changes in elevations and because we cannot touch the wetlands, those will continue to fill up and overflow and come into the site. And then where that additional volume is being held is below the wetland volume, below that elevation. And most of it's underground, so it's even further. So we're not backing up water elevation wise that would impact uphill. We're letting it come down into the site, and then we're storing it actually at lower elevations.
Do you think so you're saying you will have additional storage at lower elevations on site than today?
Correct. We're adding a substantial amount of storage on site.
Right. Will that have a net effect of helping to clear stormwater coming off the hillside area?
it's not going to get it up the hill any faster. It's not going to really impact. What really holds up that water is the wetlands and coming through that system, and we won't be impacting that process. And then there is a drop across the site, so I don't think there's any. We'd really be impacting that. We'll need to model all of that and demonstrate it, but based on our preliminary analyses, that we don't see that causing any obstructions to the upstream flow.
Thank you.
Okay, so we can probably go on. So again, this next image is just, this is something that we've shown before. These are the existing wetlands. So obviously we're going to work with you and the Conservation Commission to protect the existing wetlands. You can see what this diagram is showing, that many of the existing buildings and existing roadways, existing structures are all, in many cases, are encroaching onto those wetlands today. So we're going to avoid that. And the new proposed plan pulls back from those wetlands, allows us to protect the wetlands, and in many cases expand them to assist with the stormwater retention that we just talked about. So that's paramount to the plan. And this is a sketch again that we've shown before, but just wanted to touch on again that we're looking at the stormwater. I mean, it's a problem that we have to deal with the stormwater, but it's an opportunity too. So the expansion of the wetlands is something that we're looking at, is not something that we do have to do it, but we want to do it. Like, it's something that we can actually utilize as something to enhance the site. So we're proposing to create these constructed wetlands that would, they would connect these isolated wetlands and make the wetlands bigger, making them healthier. B, it would, help us with the stormwater retention and management. And C, it's a nice landscape feature, and it's something that would be, good for us, and our community to have that. And we're proposing sort of walking trails through there so people can actually utilize it and enjoy it. You can go on to the next one, Gene. So again, and Jeff and Chris, I'll let you guys speak to this one and the methods that we're going to employ on site.
Sure. Yeah, I think really the photo on the left is kind of tailored to the blue crosshatched areas that we showed on the graphic, and really based on, based on the high groundwater table and the poorly infiltrating soils, that storage volume is going to have to occur in a closed system. So we're likely looking at some sort of closed tank system below grade. And then the image on the right is just a quick representation of the wetland enhancement areas that we'd be looking at on the eastern portion of the site, I guess.
Yeah. And we had talked about surface retention, surface ponds, and it's something that we don't want. We don't think that it's appropriate for the site, so that's why we're looking at this system, which would be below grade. Visually, you'd have no idea it's there, but it is retaining and managing all that stormwater. And these are just images. This is what I was talking about. We're proposing some boardwalks through the constructed wetlands, and they would connect to the walking trail system. That would be, something that we think would be a great amenity.
And there won't be that much water there.
Yeah, exactly. These are just sort of representative images of the, things that we're looking at in sort of construction methodologies, but it wouldn't look exactly like this. So I'll touch quickly on, energy efficiency and sustainability. And, as we've been talking about, the existing site, is inefficient. It was built in 1970. The systems are all more or less original in many ways. The buildings are heated by underground propane tanks, for example. There's inefficient windows, inefficient doors. The electrical systems are outdated. There's really very little lighting efficiency. There's no water efficiency, like we were just talking about. So there's really not a lot going for these buildings, other than they've served people well for 50 years, but they're at the end of their lifespan. we've got big goals, and we've got, we take energy efficiency and sustainability really seriously. And with these new buildings, we've got this opportunity, to make a really exciting pedestrian friendly plan. But we also have the opportunity to design these buildings to be very high performance and really meet and exceed standards for energy efficiency and sustainability. So, we're going to take that opportunity, and we've been working with our team to really build up, what we want these buildings to look like, and how we want them to perform. And we think that this could be a model for North Andover and other communities like North Andover. So again, we're proposing to replace a poorly planned car-centric development with pedestrian-oriented neighborhood. We're integrating the design and the planning. We've talked about the bike network and support infrastructure. All of our buildings today have interior bike storage. That's something that residents demand. It's something that we think is a great amenity. It's something that is really important, and it pays off. We've talked about the natural features and walking network, connections to the surrounding new walking and biking infrastructure that's proposed as part of Mass DOT's work, which we'll talk about in the next meeting, as well as connecting to Merrimack College and making better, safer connections there so people can get out of their cars. And the mixed use neighborhood, if you want a cup of coffee today, you've got to get in your car and you got to drive down the street. And, with our proposal, you'll be able to walk downstairs, you'll be able to walk next door, and get some of the things that you otherwise would have to get in a car for. As well as, creating those transit connections. And that's something that we really want to explore and will explore. As far as the energy efficiency, these are new construction buildings, and we're planning for state-of-the-art sustainable systems. We're looking at utilizing very high efficiency heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems, mostly electric. They very likely will be all electric, something that we've looked at. Highly insulated wall systems and high performance double, triple glazed windows and door systems, solar ready roofs. And if there's an opportunity to actually, install solar panels, that's something that we would look into. Low VOC, healthy indoor air quality is something really important. We've essentially stopped, installing carpeting in many of the apartments that we build today, and utilize other high quality materials just because it vastly improves indoor air quality. We've talked about stormwater management and wetlands. We've touched on the water use efficiency, but again, we're really looking at the best methods to create the highest efficiency as it relates to water. We know that that's a sensitive topic and something that we take seriously. We've talked about utilizing systems that capture rainwater, and we would utilize that potentially for site irrigation, as well as, designing the landscape with native plantings and landscaping that uses, less water than something else that we might choose. And lastly, Aimco and Trinity we're leaders in multifamily green building, and we've done it, and we are doing it. Right now, we are building the largest residential passive house in North America in New York City. That's something that we take a lot of pride in. We've got a lot of experience doing it in other places. These are some images of a community in Norwalk, Connecticut that we're building right now. That is LEED neighborhood development certified. So this is a mixed income neighborhood. It's rebuilding the oldest public housing site in the state of Connecticut that was horribly damaged in Hurricane Sandy. It's making it, storm resilient and including, incredible amounts of energy efficiency and sustainability. So those are things that we're going to look to implement here as well. And we think that there's some really great opportunities for us. So I'll pause there, and I'm happy to answer any questions about this if there are any.
Anyone have questions or comments? Okay.
Okay.
Nope. All right. Is there anything else for tonight, Michael, that you guys are ready to present?
No, I think that's it. I'll just, very quickly, I'll just touch on the fiscal impact report. I know that that is eagerly awaited. It's eagerly awaited by us as well. We are, working with the town and the peer reviewer on that, just to make sure that all questions are answered. And, we're making sure that all the T's are crossed, the I's are dotted. And we're hopeful that will be ready for a presentation to you guys in the next couple of weeks as well. So we'll keep you posted on that.
Okay, very good. And I think it's better to have a good product than a rushed product. So,
Agreed.
okay, fantastic. Anyone else have Royal Quest questions, comments, members of the board about process or where we're going before we move on?
I would just add that this afternoon, I guess I call it a memorandum was added for pre-permitting stormwater approach that Trinity intends to take. And so it speaks to kind of the process between permitting with North Andover and Mass DEP and the milestones that they'd have to reach in order to, I guess, secure permitting on their stormwater management plan.
Okay,
But that's
fantastic.
That's in the packet as well.
And, I know the stormwater is interesting to some people, maybe not so much to other people, but it's an important part and we need to do it, and it is important. And I know the people that do it love it. And so I think it's really good that we got through it and that it's, well done. And it's something that we'll come back and touch on. I know it's not the sexiest topic, but it needs to be covered.
Yeah,
John?
I was actually kind of disappointed in the presentation on, frankly, on the stormwater, because I didn't get any kind of feel for the engineering complexity of what needed to be done and whether any of the things being done are unusual or exceptional or different, or if this is just a total chip shot no-brainer. I don't even begin to see sort of like how you manage the risk, how you manage the complexity. Now, I realize it's early in the game, but I didn't think we got any of that tonight.
Okay, well, let's see what we get. We're going to get peer review comments, right?
Yeah.
Hey, Don, I have to agree with John. I appreciate the overview. I appreciate, addressing our questions. But I got the feeling this is like a notional PowerPoint of what we're going to do. It doesn't address any of the technical aspects that I think we typically see in other large developments. So I just have a hard time. I appreciate the effort, but I think it's just notional.
Well, I'll say first that, and then Gene, I think this was meant as an overview, and that, once we get peer review comment, usually it seems like we get peer review comments, and then we really dive into, okay, are there places that the peer reviewer disagrees, or are there metrics to be used? It seemed to me that it certainly fit the purpose for tonight's meeting, and that we'll get more details as we go. At least that was my take on what we were doing tonight.
Yeah, the intent there is to give an overview, and it's always tough with stormwater because either you give too much detail and people complain about that, or there's not enough detail. And I know it's a balance. The intricacies of it will be with the development itself, in the phasing and how we have it all work together. And so we didn't want to be presumptive and jump that far ahead. I think the important pieces of it are outlined in the memorandum, and the big piece is acknowledging that there is a problem there, and that we're not just meeting the state regulatory requirements. We're not meeting just the town's requirements. We're going above and beyond what we're doing in terms of storing it. So we're being creative throughout the site, and where we find these pockets, whether it's that grade or underground, of places we can store water and still work it into a design that looks like a neighborhood. So there's a lot of pieces to it. There's a lot of intricacies to it. But the biggest thing is that we're providing an additional 28 feet of storage throughout this campus to try to to attack an existing problem and make it better, not just accommodate the project, but make it better.
Gene?
So,
Yep, so I think that's important.
make one more comment. And Chris, I appreciate those comments. I truly believe that we're not trying to be unfairly critical here.
Yeah.
But I would also put your presentation in the larger context of the presentations we've had so far. I think some members of the board have tried to be careful to caution that there is concern over the density that is proposed. And that's not today for the stormwater, that's over the whole term.
Yeah.
The many different aspects of that relatively high concern, whether it's adequate public communication, whether it's adequate articulation of what the real changes would be from today if this were done. And when we see a presentation like this, again, we appreciate what you've done, but if you take the broader view of the whole project, at least from my perspective, it kind of has a continuing tone of we're not really taking the concerns you have expressed seriously. Here's an overview, we'll be okay. And Chris, I really appreciate your point about, the 20-acre, that is very, very helpful. And this is not on you, it's on the broader project. I get the sense that there's not really a listening to the concerns that have been expressed by members of the board over the months. And so, I'll just say it again, and I'm repeating, so I'll be very brief. I think there's a serious concern about the density that's proposed, and there is a heightened need for great clarity. And you have heard me say that before. I don't get the sense yet that the presentations we're getting are responding seriously to those concerns. And those I don't characterize as my concerns alone. But anyway, enough said. And again, appreciate what you've done. And, for my part, I want to communicate that concerns that come out of it. So thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
Go ahead, Gene. Well, let's go to Gene first. Go ahead.
So I would say the agenda characterized this as preliminary discussions on stormwater management. It was intentional that the word preliminary was used. We've been through a peer review for traffic, a peer review for fiscal. Stormwater is somewhat regulatory in that it has to pass DEP standards as well as Conservation Commission standards. And so whether this goes through a peer review, I guess I'll defer to the board on that ahead of a potential town meeting on this development. But to date, we've talked about it's extremely regulatory, and the stormwater management memo that was provided that we didn't go through in detail speaks to the standards that will have to be met on stormwater. And so I would just say I'm indifferent whether it goes to peer review ahead of time. I guess that would be extremely beneficial, I think, for the board's acceptance of this design, but there is a process that they'll have to meet, and the standards they'll have to meet in order to build this out.
So I would just say that it seems that the process that I've kind of liked and sort of tried to lead this through has been overview first, then get into details, then get into public comments, and we're still in the process of that. So to be fair, I think this was kind of, at least from my perspective, what I was at least asking them to do. And Peter, I hear you. I agree with you that there are concerns, and maybe we should get to them sooner rather than later. But I'm trying to hold off so we have all the data before we hit concerns. Because I think you have been the people that have concerns, and I think people have different concerns over different things. Those have come through, at least I think. But I just don't know that the opportunity to address them has necessarily been presented yet. So I just I just think there's a balance there, and it's hard because this is such a big proposal, and there's so many different pieces to it, and we're missing still a good amount of things that I don't know that we've necessarily called for all the details yet. At least I haven't. So just if we want those uncertain things, please let me know, and then I'll do a better good job communicating that on certain things we do want more details at certain times. So
Eitan, thank you for saying that. I really do appreciate it. And, I think we've all from time to time commented that we appreciate the job you're doing as chair to bring us through this process. And I also appreciate, what you're saying about summary first. But I'm good with everything except your final comment, you doing a better job. The concerns that I've expressed are independent of the job you're doing. And I want to point it out, not just because I'm trying to be a nice guy. I want to point it out because addressing the concerns I've expressed is not up to you. It's up to the applicant. And I want to be clear on that. So everything else you said, thank you.
okay. All right. So what do we plan for next meeting? Gene or Mike?
So my recollection, I believe we were going to touch on the traffic, and Gene, please jump in here. We were going to revisit with Mass DOT, who you've invited to the next meeting, along with Jeff Dirks. We'll have obviously engage with our traffic engineer and make sure that they can attend to discuss those last sort of lingering sort of questions and comments, and be ready for a substantive conversation with Mass DOT as well, who's integral to this whole conversation. We're happy to present and discuss other things as well. We could touch on the landscape design. I know that that's something that was on the list of things that there was interest in a presentation on at some point. Some of the more specific elevations of the buildings, for example, but we could discuss that and
well, let's do traffic, and so we'll have Mass DOT available. We'll have our traffic engineer available, your traffic engineer available, and I do want to hit all of the comments and questions that have come in regarding traffic. Yep. And there may be some more that come in as we have a discussion about it. But I think this is our real first good opportunity to engage the public comment on traffic. And so but I want to be as ready as you guys can to answer specific questions, and I'll work with Gene hopefully to have a kind of a list of those questions that have come in, and so that none of them are a surprise.
Yeah. So Eitan, if I could add, I have invited Mass DOT. Coincidentally, it was to provide the board kind of an overview of the Route 114 improvement project. So it started out as that. However, given this project and the questions that have come in related to traffic, I've advised them that they should be prepared to answer some of those questions, as well as the Bertucci's and Ethan Allen redevelopment project that with prejudice is actually going to open at the next hearing as well. So they've resubmitted an application to open where they left off. And there is an abutter comment related to the Mass DOT roadway improvement project as well. And so I've provided them those comments. And so hopefully they'll be able to speak to not only this redevelopment proposal, the Bertucci's redevelopment proposal, as well as provide the board an overview of their roadway improvement plan running from Waverly to Willow Street. And so I think
that's great.
I think, Mike, to speak to that, I think that's enough in terms of.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes.
So
after reminding myself, yes.
Yeah.
So Gene, if you could really, at least if you have one more conversation with Mass DOT before they come in, the big question that I think Jeffrey Durr kind of brought up is, hey, these are all the mitigating steps that could be taken with the Mass DOT project to, address capacity. Can they do those things? Is it feasible? And how do we get assurances about those?
Yeah.
Whether they have answers for that, I don't know, but I at least want them to be prepared for that question that we're going to ask that.
Yeah.
So I've shared with them both Jeffrey's final memo and the proponent's final memo.
Great.
And asked them to speak to that. So, but I will.
Okay,
request
perfect.
it.
Okay. All right, so we'll continue till the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, approval of the February 23rd, 2021 meeting minutes.
Motion to
So,
second.
Motion made and seconded. All right, John,
yes.
Aaron,
Yes.
myself, yes, and Peter.
Aye.
Okay. Anything else before we adjourn? Wow. All right.
Great.
1 year of Zoom in the books.
Yeah.
Wow. Now, Gene, do you think if let's say everyone, I mean, obviously the governor's limitations have to come down, but at some point, what if all the members of the board are, say, vaccinated and comfortable? Would we be able to meet and then have the rest by Zoom? I mean, just that interaction and be able to have plans in front of us, I find to be helpful, even if we let people in one at a time, you know?
Above my pay grade, but the Board of
Okay.
Selectmen did meet the last time. The Board of Selectmen were in person. However, the public comment was still virtual. So
Right.
I
Well,
would say that.
the school committee has consistently met in person. So
At least some of them, yeah.
do it?
Can we ask?
I can visit it with the town manager and ask, but
It would be great to have the option for
Yep.
high-risk families.
And of course, anyone that wanted to do it remotely would be able to, but I know I'd like to get out of the house.
me too.
I hear ya.
Well, Kelly, you have a tree house.
I have a tree house right now.
Yeah.
Tree is gone though. The tree is gone.
Okay.
Just have poles.
All right. We get a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved by Peter.
Second?
All in favor, John,
Yes.
Aaron,
Yes.
yes, Peter.
Aye.
All right, very good. Thank you, everyone.